Welcome to today's podcast interview. I brought on Phyllis Levitt. Phyllis, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here, Heather.
Please give listeners a little background. Where do you live and what do you do?
Okay, I live in Taos, New Mexico, and I have been a psychotherapist of over 30 years, and I'm an author. And I just wrote a book called America in Therapy, in which I have brought so many years of my experience to talking about America from the point of view of our collective family dynamics. What isn't working, why it isn't working from a psychological point of view, what's the outcome if we don't shift courses, and then really bringing the best of what I believe psychotherapy and family systems theory has to offer in terms of how we could begin to heal some of the great divides and escalating violence in America today.
Well, and what I love about this idea is we're really talking about our culture and paradigms. And I want to define those and talk about what that is. And it is important that the whole to change the individuals, but also the individuals, we can change ourselves and have that ripple effect without needing that whole cultural paradigm shift first, right?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I stress because I hear a lot of people today say they feel like we've gone over the tipping point. It's too late for the human race. There's nothing I can do. I'm just going to live my life kind of.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's true. I think we can all have a part in healing ourselves, in healing our families, in
Yeah.
healing the communities that we live in, and healing the nation, which is really helping heal the world. We can all have a part. And I think we need to know that and be inspired by one another,
Yeah.
that we're in this together and we can change it together. I see it happen all the time on an individual basis, and a country is no more than a collection of individuals.
Yeah.
So it can happen.
Well, and obviously we're stronger together, but as an example, a lot of the work I'm in, personal development, once you are on this path and start moving away from unconscious into conscious, becoming aware of your thoughts and your beliefs and wanting to change areas of life, well, everybody I know, we seek more like-minded people. And so clearly we're stronger together in community. But before we go down that path about creating this cultural paradigm shift, can you please explain what is a paradigm, especially an individual one?
Well, I'll give an example because I think that's the easiest way to do it. And we had mentioned this earlier, and that is one of the things I write about in my book, American Therapy, is the paradigm around power dynamics between people. We live more or less in a paradigm that accentuates domination and submission. Somebody has power, somebody's a leader,
Yeah.
other people have less power, and they either choose to follow, or they're compelled to follow, or they have no choice to follow, or they're forced to follow. And that paradigm shift, that paradigm of power over has been, it's age old. It has been part of our survival. We have to have power over, to some extent, our environment to create our food source or ensure our safety. But there's a tipping point at which our power over has become a danger to us in terms of just, very simply in terms of the ways that we have dominated Mother Earth in ways that are toxic to the life forms here and creating a lot of extinction of species and pollution and our ability to create weapons of mass destruction. That's certainly a power to dominate, but it's not in service of the perpetuation and ultimate sustainability of all life, including humans. So we're looking at a shifting paradigm to how do we share power for the common good? And I guess I would just say that that touches on another paradigm, and please take this away wherever you want to go, which is an emphasis on the part as opposed to an emphasis on the whole. And and part of our strength and part of our development as human beings has been this sort of fierce individualism and get ahead kind of mentality and develop our strengths and our abilities and our intelligence. And all of that is good until it kind of tips over to a place where the importance of the individual, whether it's a person, a gender, a leader, a country, as opposed to having some kind of balance between the good of the individual and the power of the individual and the good of the whole. And I think we're at that place in our human development and our human history where we have to factor in both. And I don't know if you've heard this term, but when I heard it, it really spoke to what I think the paradigm shift is that we're looking for in terms of power. And it's called sovereign unity. And that concept is a dynamic, ongoing balance between the good and the rights of the individual and the good of the whole, in constant dialogue, in constant balance, so that one doesn't take precedence over the other. And that's a challenge for the human race, but one that I think we're capable of because we do that in the best of our relationships.
Yeah. So I took a couple notes, some things that are coming to mind. First, I just want to define what I understand a paradigm to be, which is
Mm,
simply like an individual, your paradigm. Some people use the term your mindset is simply your worldview, your perception, the lens that you see through.
okay.
So, as an example, an individual paradigm who thinks life sucks and then you die, right?
Right.
Some
That could
people
be
have that paradigm.
right.
You have the ability to, I think of it as being curious. If you live in curiosity, or Carol Dweck wrote a book called Mindset, fixed mindset versus growth mindset, you have the ability to flip the script and to start thinking differently, that maybe I'm in a world of infinite potentiality. Maybe I'm not stuck based on my upbringing or where I'm from. But two things that come to mind when you're talking about this cultural paradigm: we come from a very antiquated system, kings, queens,
Totally.
peasants, slavery. And some of that is still, quote, in power today. And it's an old antiquated system.
100%.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like, this is a paradigm shift that we desperately need
Yeah.
and that will serve us. The paradigm that we're in about power over, or, the royalty and the serfs or whatever, kind of mentality that we're still clinging to and still subject to is hurting the
Yeah.
human race.
So the next thing that came to mind was thinking old school. And as an example, and I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, I think our school system sets us up for failure, very boxed thinking. But something that came to mind was the old Darwinian system, right? Survival of the fittest. So we have ingrained deeply competition instead of collaboration, lack and scarcity instead of abundance. So, can we talk on an individual level on how to eradicate that competitive man stepping over others and instead stepping into collaboration? What's that saying? When one ship rises, all ships rise.
Right. Well, one of the things that I remember very clearly from a class that I took in graduate school in psychology, I was in a class on couples therapy. And one of the things that the instructor said that I've never forgotten is, well, there were two things. So they were, no one wins a power struggle. We think we win if we, force the other person into our point of view, or we make them give us what we want or whatever. But we don't win relationship. We
Yeah.
don't win connectivity. We
Mm.
might win the argument, but we don't win relationship. And the other thing that he said, and I want to kind of put these two things together, is that he said the couples who do the best in his experience of being a couples therapist are those in which each person starts to take more and more responsibility for their contribution to the relationship, rather than where most people start. And it's part of the paradigm that we live in, which is fix my partner. My partner's to blame. I can't get them to see what they're doing wrong.
Yeah.
And hoping that the therapist will take their side and set their partner straight. And sometimes there's things that need to be corrected, for sure. But ultimately, we each have the power to change our relationship ourselves by not dancing the old dance, whether it's, trying to, you know, um, which is usually some form of a power struggle. I need you to see it my way. But the other person is in the same boat. So that's what creates the power struggle.
Yeah. Okay, so actually, I would love to deep dive this topic. This is one of the major pain points I see come across my desk nearly daily. I shared with you I have a free resource on my website, the Life Assessment, and ranking those major life buckets, relationships being one, personal, romantic, and think about family feuds. And there's so much judgment and comparison and finger pointing. But I love
Right.
the idea when we point the finger, we have three pointing back at us.
Mm,
And if the divorce rate is well over 50%, then there is, I don't like to use the word broken, but something is not right in relationships, and we keep seeking, "Oh, well, it'll be better in the next relationship," only to find out it's the same problems.
right.
So can we talk about the relationship dynamic, repairing, I think first self in order to quote repair the relationship and taking that radical responsibility?
Yeah. I think not every person in our country obviously has the availability of really good psychotherapy. And I think it's a shame that our resources aren't directed toward personal healing and healing families, because it's really the root of almost all pain that eventually, emanates from that. People who grew up in horrible childhoods have less opportunity to live constructive lives and create meaningful and safe relationships themselves. So, um, I'm sorry, you have to go back to your question.
Well, and actually, I'm going to bring this top of mind. I had a conversation with a man like 2 weeks ago, and here's a prime example. I'm no longer in the dating scene, but people who are on dating apps, as an example, like that's just, it's a hot mess everywhere. People ghosting, looking for the grass is greener. But this man shared with me, I'm emotionally unavailable and I keep attracting poor relationships. So I was like, oh my gosh, first of all, you shouldn't be dating. But how important is it to heal our own quote
Oh,
wounds or
right.
whatever in order to create or attract that ideal partnership that you're both thriving together?
Yeah. No, I think there's sort of a both and there. I think working on our own wounds is very important, and
Yeah.
understanding what they are. Like with all the tools that are out there, am I emotionally avoidant? Am I emotionally secure? There's just many different paradigms. Your 10 questions, I'm sure, speak to some of that. So understanding where we're coming from. And I say this is true for a person and it's true for a country. We really do have to know our history. What were the values that we learned growing up? How did people resolve conflict? What were the roles for men and women that we saw role modeled? What were the expectations? What was praised? Did we get punished for? What were the consequences when we broke the rules of whatever the family system was? We need to know these things because, and I think you use the word, they go into our subconscious as models of what relationships should be,
Mm,
what my role should be, and what I should expect from others. So if I grow up in a family that's somewhat abusive emotionally or physically or sexually, that's part of my unconscious conditioning, that's what I can expect out of life.
yeah.
And I'll probably react in some way that I learned as a child to that environment. And I talk about this a lot in my book, the two big categories of reaction to unhealthy family dynamics, and there are lots of symptoms that can go along with that, but the two categories are people who tend to become submissive because they have been overpowered and they couldn't exert their personal power safely,
Mm,
or those who have identified with the aggressor and become like the aggressor in their family.
mm,
And we tend to attract each other. And that's how these dynamics get repeated and repeated and repeated. We
yeah.
attract what we know unconsciously. And the key is making it conscious and obviously reprocessing
Yeah.
some of that early conditioning.
Okay, I'm gonna bring a personal example to mind. And
Right.
I figured I'm currently 38, but I figured this stuff out in my 20s. and that's why it's so important to be, I call it self-radical responsibility, but just becoming so aware of your own patterns. And
Right.
as an example, in my 20s, I kept attracting the same kind of guy, different face, but the same kind of guy. And the saying is, you don't attract what you want, you attract what you are.
Or what you know. You know,
So that's what I did. I attracted what I knew. And as an example, I kept attracting workaholic, emotionally unavailable men.
right.
So when I did the internal work and I was like, okay, the common denominator in all of these relationships is me. What is it about me?
That's right.
Lack of self-worth, what I learned growing up. And I was in this amazing guided meditation. I was in San Diego at this personal development thing, and I had this whole very visual thing, but it was my younger self. She was little, like 4, coming, walking towards me in a field, and I bent down and hugged her deep. But here was what came out of that for me. As an adult, I can understand that my dad was a workaholic. My mom stayed at home, so my dad was the sole provider, and he did what he had to do to provide for his family. But that little girl created a story. I'm not worthy and deserving of dad's time and attention. So,
Mm-hmm.
of course, I would attract men
Right.
who are
Right.
workaholics and emotionally unavailable. So, long story short, when I became aware of that, and I had so much self-love and compassion, and then I chose, I want different partners. I have dated completely different guys since.
Right.
But it was a process, it was a journey. And you're right, so many people, because I hear it all the time, especially with coaching, the men are pointing fingers at the spouse. If she was more grateful, if she did things differently. So what can we talk about in that angle that when we change, we can be an example for the partner, and or maybe the partner will fall away.
Right. Right. One or the other. Either the relationship will become healthier
Yeah,
or I will find a way to exit from the relationship peacefully,
yeah,
without a lot of like, hurling, insults and whatever, trying to hurt the other person.
yeah.
So yeah, those are the two outcomes. And the bottom line is whether the relationship reassembles in a healthy way or I choose to leave because it's no longer sustainable to stay in an unhealthy relationship. I have my own integrity. I know that I did the best that I could possibly do to heal or leave. And again, I just want to say no one does it perfectly. We're human. Sometimes we get triggered, and we do not behave like our best selves. But I don't, for me, the model is not perfection. The model is not, I will always do the things some of the things I'm going to mention to you perfectly, because I won't. I'm a therapist of 34 years and I still don't do them perfectly with my husband. But what we do have is we have an absolute commitment to drop it when we can and come back to a place of love. And we always come back to a place of love, whether we've communicated absolutely perfectly or not. And I'll share with you some of the elements that I have sort of distinguished that make it more possible to drop our triggers more quickly with less damage to ourselves in the relationship. And if you want, I'll sort of list them.
Yeah.
I call them the 6 elements of repair. We're all good at rupturing relationships. We all know how to either fight or wall off or retaliate or, blame or, whatever we do. We're all good at that. We don't need any help with those kind of mechanisms. What we need help with are like to know that it's actually possible to repair a rupture in a relationship. And there's some really important elements to doing that. And the bottom line for those, I'm going to name these 6 elements of repair, but the bottom line is, and I heard this statement recently, and it really encapsulates how I feel about relationship. If it's you and me, we're each 50% of the relationship, and I'm 100% responsible for myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's the bottom line is what can I be responsible for myself?
Mm.
Because that's really the key to healing relationship. And if you have 2 people who are committed to that, you really have like such great
Power.
possibility. right? And we can help each other in that regard. So the 6 things that I have identified that I think are just critical to healing ruptures in relationship are, number one, I call it restraint. And that means I may be really activated by you. I may really disagree. I may feel really angry at you or hurt by something you did or said, but I'm not going to pull out my big guns. I'm not going to be verbally assaultive. I'm not going to slam doors. I'm not going to make ugly faces at you. I'm not going to make, idle, terrible threats or whatever. I'm going to restrain the part of myself that really needs to listen, because the bottom line, and I probably say this about 10 things, so there's probably 10 bottom lines, but one of the bottom lines for repairing relationship is I have to learn how to listen to you the way I want you to listen to me.
Mm.
And I have to learn to speak to you the way that I want to be spoken to. And these are the hardest things for people to do when they're angry or hurt or triggered or otherwise activated in some old wound. Um, and again, we don't do it perfectly, but what we can do is keep coming back. We can keep coming back. So if I lose my temper and my voice gets raised, I can catch myself and I can come back to restraint. Okay, I don't want you to yell at me. I'm not going to yell at you. Okay. So restraint is a big one. And really, what it means is I have to learn how to tolerate my own distress and not
Mm.
act out on you or on me. And this is a big one, because we don't want to tolerate our own distress. We just want to project it out onto the
Yes.
other person and have them, do something differently or fix it or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's restraint is big. The second one is reflection. Like, I'm reflecting on myself. Okay, what's my part in what's going on?
Mm.
Do I have a part? Now, if somebody just beats me with a baseball bat, I don't have a part in that. Like, I didn't make them hit me with a baseball bat. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the where we actually have a chance to repair a relationship with another person or a group. And that is, I'm reflecting on myself. What are my old wounds that are getting activated here? What are my coping mechanisms that are sort of default ones, like I shut down and I don't talk to you because that's what I learned to do when I was 4, when my parent was yelling at me. Or what, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um, so I reflect on my own part in what's going on. And I just want to say, because I feel so compassionate for us as human beings, these are hard things to do. Waging war with another person, as uncomfortable as it is easy. We're just on automatic reactive pilot, right?
Right.
Pulling back and tolerating my own distress and listening to you, even when I really don't like what you're saying, and reflecting on myself. This takes enormous strength, enormous strength.
Yeah.
Like therapy, personal development is not a cowardly thing to do. It takes the most strength in the world. And I say that to people because I experience that.
Yeah.
So, hand in hand with self-reflection is responsibility. What am I then responsible for?
Is that number three?
Yeah. So, can I be responsible to lower my voice? Can I be responsible to actually lean in and say, tell me more about how you're feeling? I don't agree with you, but I want to understand you. I mean, these things are really hard to do. If you've ever been in an intimate relationship where you're really triggered by your partner or by your child or by a boss, you know that these things are really difficult to do. But taking responsibility is a key to getting out of the power struggles that hurt us so much with other people. And there's so many things we can be responsible for. And again, these all these elements that I'm outlining for you overlap. But I take them apart just to identify them, because responsibility moves right into the next one. I call it rehabilitation, but it's really rehabilitating myself.
Mm.
Okay, do I, and hand in hand with that is, maybe I need to make amends. Maybe I need to apologize to you for what I said that hurt your feelings, or what I did that made you feel left out, or whatever I did. Most often, even with the best of intentions, most of us inadvertently hurt another person out of our own, maybe not malintent, but out of our own inability to see the whole picture of a relationship or tune into you because I'm kind of tuned into myself. So, and if you've ever had the experience, and I say this all the time, if you've ever had the experience of someone genuinely making amends to you and taking responsibility for their own behavior and not blaming you as an add-on, like a but you, if
Yeah.
you've ever had that experience, it's incredible.
Mm.
It's incredible to receive someone actually making an amend to you for a way that they hurt you and caring about their impact on you. And we can do this for each other.
Mm.
And it's life-changing to be either the initiator of that or to be the recipient of that.
Yeah.
And then the fifth element is, often I call it resolution. It's really, is there an agreement that we then need to make? Okay, I agree that I will, if I'm going to be late, I'll call you. I mean, I'm using little things that come up in relationships. Sometimes they're really big things. I will agree that I will not take money out of the bank account without telling you. It could be anything in a relationship. I agree that I will no longer spank the kids. It can be whatever it has to be agreed on, but we make agreements. Sometimes, after the first four elements are accomplished, restraint, self reflection, taking responsibility, and making amends or rehabilitating myself, sometimes the disagreement just disappears and there's no agreement that needs to be made because I get you and you get me and we're good. But sometimes we really need to make agreements. Like, I will really try not to say blah, blah when I'm upset with you. Um, and then the last one's really the goal. And it is reconnection, that we really reconnect with one another emotionally, that we've worked through because we've listened deeply, we've restrained ourselves, we've really tried our best to talk to each other the way we want to be spoken to. We've heard some genuine apologies if that's appropriate. Um, we're back in a space of caring and love. And the more people can do this with one another in their homes, in their places of business, in their places of worship, with their children, with their friends, in their state, in their country, the more we can do this with one another, the less we're prone to want to go to war on any level, emotionally, economically, racially, gender-wise, because we're connected. And when you're connected, you feel love. And as I think I said in the very beginning, what I have found after years and years of my own personal work and being a psychotherapist is that love is the best food for human beings.
Yeah.
We thrive when we're loved.
Yeah.
And these six things that I just mentioned are part of being loving.
Yeah. Two things come to mind that you share that you use the word trigger, which I actually just released a podcast on that. But triggers are really important to understand and think of them as knee-jerk reactions
Yep.
when you have that emotional response to defend or lash out. Here's
Right.
what I love. Peter Crone uses this quote because I believe our triggers are a gift. But
Mhm.
Peter Crone's quote is, people and circumstances come into our life to reveal where we're not healed. And so if we don't lash out at others and go, whoa, whoa, what's this bringing up in me? Anger, resentment, guilt, shame. That's where the liberation and the freedom comes from, right? Like becoming aware, seeing the gift. So I like the idea of the reflection, the responsibility, and then we no longer have to keep repeating all of that, right?
Right. That's
And
right.
it's like all these adults are running around with emotional intelligence of a child, and then we wonder why relationships are so bad.
Right. I mean, 100% absolutely true. I would love to see psychology and family therapy and group dynamics be part of our ordinary curriculum, that we
Yeah.
learn this as children. I can't even imagine how my life would have been different if I
Mm.
had learned any of these things when I was young, you know? Um,
Or even, what's coming to mind is kind of like a higher level, but what's talked about a lot, what I study, is that brain and heart coherence. So under being able to self-regulate through breath and mindfulness practices, because most people are living at such high stress levels, which are creating so much dysfunction.
Well, and I think going back to your original word, I think the when we live at such high stress levels, people are more prone to be triggered. You
Yeah,
know, our emotional, our nervous system is so dysregulated that the littlest thing can set people off
yeah,
and trigger, a whole slew of reactions that go back to an injury we had when we were 3 from, somebody who made fun of us or somebody who put us down because we stuttered or whatever it was.
yeah.
So yes, it's really like having some kind of a practice to help regulate your nervous system really does help.
So now I want to come back to kind of what you ended the 6 elements to repair on was the idea of love being the best food, the best medicine that we all need. But
Mhm.
something that I love Christmas time. I love the energy, the idea of it's kind of a magical time. Miracles happen. There's so much giving and contribution and like looking out for one another. And if we had that, now I'm getting major chills. If
Yeah.
we
Me
had
too, actually.
that idea of a Christmas spirit year round, again,
Mhm.
back to this collaboration, not competition. And I think there's a lot of good in this world, but it's easy to focus on the not good. But how can we as individuals do this work and start showing up differently so we have that ripple effect and can create this cultural change?
Yeah. No, I mean, and I think, I always say this, and these things that we're talking about are free. They don't
Yeah,
cost anything. It
yeah,
doesn't cost anything to be kinder to someone who's waiting on us who may be grumpy and not friendly. It
yeah,
doesn't cost anything to say, hey, are you having a bad day? Or just to smile and be friendly. It doesn't cost anything. Um, we've probably all had this experience. I was standing in line at the grocery store the other day, and there was a woman standing behind me holding a little boy who was probably 3 or 4 months old. And he was just looking intently at me, like just like intently in my eyes, right? And so I looked back and all of a sudden I just started smiling and saying, "Look at you, beautiful boy. How are you today?" And his face lit up like, just like, and he was smiling and giggling, and we had this beautiful exchange. And then his mom joined in. And I saw his dad was over in another aisle and he was looking over smiling. And it was so beautiful and it
yeah,
was so easy. And we all need that. We actually all need that. I know how I feel when I think of a checkout line, because that's often where I see strangers, where the checkout person is super friendly. How are you today? Like, just lights us up. We
yeah.
can, little acts of kindness can actually change the world. And if I can say something bigger,
Mm,
um, so there's a beautiful book that I read years ago called, I think it's called Blaming the Victim. And the guy who wrote the book talked about an experience he had being a teacher of an elementary class in an inner city school. And he was given this class of little kids, and he was told, these are the slow kids, don't expect much.
mm,
And
mm.
he walked into that classroom and he told the kids they were the brightest and that that they were all highly gifted. We're going to learn to read well or whatever the curriculum was. And they outperformed everybody's expectations. And it's really that, I think, is a paradigm shift of like seeing the essence of one another, because we all have a beautiful essence. It might be covered over with pain, it might be covered over with violence, it might be covered over with self-hatred, but we all were born with that beautiful essence. And when someone sees you as your beautiful essence,
Yeah,
it is one of the most profound gifts we can give one another. And again, it's free,
yeah.
costs
Kind
nothing.
kindness is free. I think it's a meme or something out there years and years ago, but it spread kindness like confetti.
Mm.
Something
Beautiful.
that's coming to mind on this topic that I'd love to touch on, because it's really just coming to mind, be the change we wish to see. And of course, as humans, we might have off days, but if
Totally.
if we're extending that, then that's going to come back to us because life is a boomerang, right?
Right.
What we put out, we get back. But here's what's coming to mind that I think all of us can relate to. And I think it becomes a habit, and man, it doesn't feel good. But judgment and comparison, judging others or comparing, I'm not enough, I'm not where they're at. I had a conversation with a gentleman yesterday on a master class I did, and that's what he said. He's, and this is a grown man, but he's at work and he's comparing himself to others, and then we have this belief, I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, blah, and that's what messes us up. But at a high level, can we talk about judgment and comparison and maybe on how to break the cycle because it's not serving us?
Yeah. Well, I think that that is one of the things. Judgment is huge. I
Yeah.
mean, judgment is constantly making something better and something worse, somebody better and somebody worse, something right and something wrong,
Mm,
rather than bringing us together in a place of mutual understanding. And so, something that I learned as a therapist, because part of a therapist's job is not to judge. Because if you're putting out judgment to your client, all you're going to do is hurt them further. They've already been hurt by the judgment that's been heaped on them or that they've been throwing out into the world. And a place of non-judgment is really, to me, at its heart, is acceptance, but with a deep understanding that I don't actually really know where you're coming from. I may not like the tone of your voice or the words you use, but you're coming from somewhere where you were conditioned to behave the way that you're behaving. And
yeah.
so my job is to try to help you get to what created some kind of conditioning that isn't serve you in your relationship life, not to judge you for what you're doing. And if I can just say this really quickly, this is what is so missing in our criminal justice system. We are not about rehabilitating people. We're not about finding out what hurt them that caused them to go so astray in their lives that they would injure other people. Because, one of the things that I did a little bit of research on this when I wrote my book, um, way more than half of the people who are currently incarcerated in the United States have unhealed child abuse.
Of course.
It's just terrible. And
Yeah.
we need to look at each other without that kind of judgment and look for cause and look for effect and look for what is the healing way out of our
Mm,
most destructive behaviors,
yeah. I,
ourselves and in other people.
I totally agree. Phyllis, here's I want to ask you. We've touched on a lot, and I mean, I took heavy notes here, but that six elements of repair I think is very valuable. But I want to ask you, what do you believe is a key takeaway you want listeners to get from today?
Yeah, I mean, I think I guess I would just say start with like looking at yourself.
Yeah.
Something really hurting you in your life, chances are you came by that honestly. And you deserve a place to process that. And because most of what hurts us in our lives leaves us with negative beliefs about ourselves and probably coping mechanisms that aren't so constructive. And
Yeah.
so if you find yourself in that loop that you described, you keep attracting the same dysfunctional thing over and over again, chances are there's a deep hurt underneath there that you deserve to have healed, whether you have the opportunity to go to therapy or you read books on, healing, or you have some other modality. Maybe it's a mindfulness modality or a nonviolent conflict resolution class you're in, or mediation, or your own spiritual practice. We're and reach out to other people, because so often the message, and I know that I had this as a child, nobody said this to me, but the message I got was I'm on my own. And
Mm,
the last thing I wanted to do was reach out and tell somebody else that I was in pain.
mm.
And it was life-changing for me when I was finally able to do that.
Yeah. Well, we need each other, right? We crave that connection and like we need that. And especially
Absolutely.
the last few years have been so much isolation and and then numbing out on social media and all of
Yeah,
our vices. I mean, that's a whole nother topic, but we crave and need that connection.
absolutely. 100%. We do. And again, I would say that is part of what is the best food for human beings is
Mm,
safe, caring, cooperative, nonviolent connection with other people.
yes, I love that. I'd love to wrap up the interview, so I have a couple of rapid fire questions for you.
Sure.
What is a quote or motto that you live by?
You know, one that I heard really early on that I actually have lived by is lean into your pain.
Mm,
Like lean in, don't lean out because it won't go away, number one. And number two, it is a beautiful source of healing. You know, I went to a workshop when I was in graduate school, and the theme of the workshop was your greatest pain is the source of your greatest gifts. And I think
yes.
that's really true.
On that note, I very similar. You have to feel it to heal it. And I had
Yeah.
a conversation with somebody, a gentleman yesterday. He's like, I just constantly stay busy so I don't have to deal with that mental chaos. And my comment was, you can't outrun you.
You can't. That's
Yeah.
right.
Oh, I love that. What is a book you're currently reading or highly recommend?
Oh gosh, I just finished a great book called Between Two Kingdoms by Suleika I think it's Jaoud. And it was a autobiographical account by this woman Suleika who survived really life-threatening cancer. And it's very deep and very profound, and she's a fabulous writer. So I highly recommend that book.
Final question. What advice would you give your younger self?
Oh gosh. Um, well, that's a good one. What advice would I give my younger self? I think I would just want to look my younger self in the eyes and see her, like see her essence, see her beauty, see her innocence that got covered over so young for me,
Yeah,
and of course, my journey of unpeeling back those layers or peeling back those layers um, was a magnificent journey, and I'm glad that I got the opportunity to do it. But, wouldn't it be nice if many of us didn't have to make that journey and we just got to be who we were in our beauty and our essence and our power and our gifts from the beginning?
for sure. And such a great note to end on. Phyllis, I loved this conversation. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. I loved talking with you. Just super. And thank you so much for having me here today.